So I'll put that up now. Let me just admit that next person. So what I want to be doing this morning is having an opportunity to talk about how to help women successfully work through the menopause, and also offer opportunities for you to ask questions. So the way I'm going to run the session, I want to talk a bit about the background to the menopause. Lots of you will already be very familiar, but just to make sure that everyone's got a sort of an equal understanding. To have the opportunity to talk about your experiences, your questions, your concerns, then obviously to look at symptoms. That's probably the #1 thing that people come wanting to know about. And then strategies and support. So that's how the session is going to run. And we will definitely finish by 10 o'clock. So what is the menopause? So technically speaking, the menopause is the moment when you stop having periods, where you've gone a whole year without having periods. So it's broken up into 4 stages. There's pre-menopause, which is all the bit post-puberty, when life is relatively normal and you're having periods every month. Perimenopause is the bit when your hormones start fluctuating and you start to experience menopausal symptoms. Menopause is literally one day. It's the anniversary of a year since you last had period, and then post-menopause is the rest of your life. So that's the sort of technical biological thing, but of course it doesn't in any way capture the emotional, psychological, physical ramifications of going through the menopause. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about what's going on. We have 3 key hormones that are regulating us during puberty and ongoing through all the time that we're having our periods. And those are estrogen, progesterone, and it's really important that we don't overlook testosterone. It's often assumed that testosterone is just a male hormone. It isn't. It plays a really, really important function in our female bodies as well. And what happens as we start approaching the menopause is that those hormones start to decline. And that creates enormous fluctuations, which affects our mood, affects our sleeping patterns, and so many other symptoms, which we will talk about in a little bit. So that's what happens, and that is a long-term hormone deficiency. Dr. Louise Newson, I'll be talking about her a lot, and I will be putting information about her in one of the resource sheets I will be sharing with everyone afterwards. She would actually like to rebrand the menopause as long-term hormone deficiency. And one of the things I want to talk to you about is the importance not just of looking at that period of menopause, but actually your long-term health as you go into older age. So the average age of menopause. Now, there's going to be lots of things here that I'm going to be talking about where it's difficult, it's complicated or contentious, because the average age of menopause has typically been said to be 51. Now, that is the average age in white women. And what's becoming obvious is that women from the global majority actually have different experiences of the menopause. Black women, women from India tend to go into the menopause earlier. So already we need to be aware that when we're talking about averages, it is very, very different depending on your ethnicity. There's also a lot of growing awareness of early menopause. Some of you may have picked up a recent UK government call for all women to have menopause talked about in a health check aged 45. But actually some women go into menopause before that, in their 30s, and occasionally even younger than that. So it's really, really important that we are aware that this can affect some women much, much earlier. The reason I'm wanting to talk to you about this is because of the 1 in 10 who leave the workplace. I'll talk a little bit more about my commitment to this, but it's very much rooted in my passion for gender equality. And we cannot achieve gender equality if women are leaving the workplace or they're reducing their hours, their seniority, and so forth. So that is a really, really important thing. If we want to get more women in senior leadership positions, we've got to do more to support women working through the menopause. But on a moral level as well, suicide rates and divorce rates peak for women during the ages of 45 to 55. Now, that is not to suggest that the menopause causes those things, but it probably plays a part. So again, the more we can raise awareness of this, the more we can be supporting women not to be having those, obviously really, really distressing incidences. But there's also a huge financial implication. There was an article about London which suggests that it is costing the London economy £2 billion in women leaving the workplace or being off sick and so forth. And that's bad news at any point, but it's particularly bad for us at the moment when obviously we're in such financial difficulty. So lots and lots of reasons why more and more of us are wanting to try to campaign to improve women's experiences. And I wanted to just share a little bit about my experience. I wanted to flag up that every woman's experience is different. So just because this happened to me, it doesn't mean it will happen to you. Some women do have minimal experiences of menopausal symptoms and manage to go through with it not having that much of an impact. But from talking to all the women that I've talked to, I know that my experience was not unusual, and I had a very, very distressing experience of menopause. Now, what is always really, really difficult is to know what is behind that. At the time, I was trying to finish a PhD, I was working all but full time, and I had 2 small children. So, who knows when I had mood swings, depression, wasn't sleeping, what was causing that. But certainly the menopause was playing a very large part. And the things that I found the most distressing were memory loss. I had been, up until that point, one of the most frighteningly organized women that most people had come across. Friends of mine would say to me, it's just scary how you can remember all sorts of things. I'd had experience in senior leadership. I'd run a department of 17. I could remember every single detail of everything that I needed to be doing and what other people needed to be doing. And suddenly that went. And I was left in a situation of not being able to remember, the classic thing where you think it's sort of, you're becoming senile. You sort of walk into a room and you go, I can't remember why I'm here. It was also incredibly embarrassing. I do a lot of training. I do a lot of events. And I turned to a colleague, a dear friend who I'd known for a very long time. And I was about to introduce her and I couldn't remember her name. So there's a lot of embarrassment and shame about that in a professional context. The shame was also that I'd always prided myself on appearing to be very professional, at keeping my personal life to one side, and I could not stop crying at work. And again, I found that, in front of younger colleagues, in front of people that I was line managing. And then the thing that we laugh about it now, but the turning point was when I threw a very, very heavy first aid kit across the room in front of my husband and my 2 still quite young children. And at the time, they were deeply shocked and distressed. It's now become something that we do. As I say, we laugh about, are you going to throw a first aid kit again? For some women, they're not in the sort of family dynamic where that can become something that you laugh about. And I was hearing a very distressing story last night about a woman who became homeless because her family literally kicked her out because they thought she'd gone mad. So this can have serious implications. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because I just kept on going back to the doctor or thought that there were things that were really weird about me, my body odor changed. That was really disorientating. I smelt different. So I'd wake up every morning going, what's going on? I had heart palpitations. I got itchy skin, and I was going back and forth to the doctor about all of these different things, thinking I'm becoming a hypochondriac. And I didn't join up all of the dots thinking These are all related to the menopause. And even as late as last year, I started to develop digestive problems, which are related to menopause and those declining hormones. So I wanted to quote, so Kate Muir, many of you may have come across two fantastic documentaries that Davina McCall was featured in. And she has done perhaps more than anybody else to raise awareness of the menopause. And Kate Muir is the producer behind that program. And I love this quote because it should be actually about a positive metamorphosis. My view is that the menopause gives us the opportunity or forces upon us a time of reevaluating how we work and how we live. And for me, it forced it upon me. I really, really struggled so much that I had to look at every single aspect of my life. And as a result, I am now happier and healthier than I was in my 30s and my 40s. So it can be a really positive opportunity to think about how we want to lead our lives. I mean, many of us will be alive into our 80s, 90s, and quite a few of us into our hundreds. So that's a very large piece of our life ahead of us. It can be a very, very positive experience if we use this as an opportunity for reevaluation. So what I wanted to do now is I'm going to, let me just double check that I can. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I'm going to suggest that you go into breakout rooms and just have a conversation for 5 minutes with 2 or 3 other people and talk about your experience of menopause, the questions that you have if you haven't yet gone through it, and so forth. And part of my reason for doing that is that I think it's really, really good for you to have the opportunity to meet other people and to talk to other people. But also because what I'm hoping is when you come back into the space, I always think these sorts of events, if you don't get the chance to talk, they can feel very cold. And I'm very, very keen that you start to build a confidence in having your voice. So I'm going to create 12 breakout rooms. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes. That should put 3 to 4 of you in a room. And I will see you back here in 5 minutes. Recording back on and then share the screen. So, symptoms. There are some people who seem to suggest there are 34 symptoms. Other people say more than 50. My view, sort of coming back to what was said before, is that if it's an unusual symptom and it's happening in your perimenopause and menopause, chances are it might be related to the menopause. So I think there is, so many things that that we don't expect. I think somebody said, wasn't expecting digestive issues and so forth. We tend to know about the hot flushes, possibly the insomnia and the mood swings, but so many other things are in there, and many of them are really, really distressing. Adult acne, I mean, that was one that I still have, and you sort of think, surely one of the good things about getting older is that you don't get adult acne, but I'm afraid post-menopause that still goes on. And a lot of these things, in my experience, HRT helps with. I will talk about HRT in a little bit. Again, it's one of those very conflicted areas, but it helps with a lot of these things. It doesn't necessarily address them fully. And one of the things I've done is I've deliberately put in bold the things that seem to come up more and more and more in the people that I talk to. So memory loss, I've already talked about, brain fog, exhaustion and insomnia, they're massive. And for me, HRT didn't sort that out. I had to do other things to try to address that. And the one I really wanted to look at, just because I think it's an issue for women anyway, I coach a lot of women, and confidence is probably the biggest obstacle in most women's working lives. So it's already an issue for women at work, and the menopause impacts that even more. And that's why I'm so passionate about trying to address that. So it is a time of trying to take on board that you will change. And I love this. This is this wonderful website that puts up lots of very funny messages around the menopause. And I regularly refer to this in my household. I say to my children, you know, I am going to forget immediately. If you come at me when I think I'm capable of doing something else at the same time, it's just going to go. I think what's interesting is that there's now a lot of doubt being cast on the concept of multitasking anyway. But certainly for me, I cannot, you know, I absolutely can do all of those three at the same time. And the thing that I would like to recommend more than anything else is make your mobile phone your friend. If I can, you know, pass on one piece of advice, it's just put everything into your mobile phone the moment it's said to you, whether it's a note, whether it's a reminder on your calendar, and so forth, because that for me has been a real strategy around memory loss and my problems around multitasking. So I wanted to share with you some strategies. So the first one I've already alluded to, which is around preparation. So for those of you who are younger, it is brilliant that you are here, because the more that you can prepare and research the symptoms, research the strategies that you can use to address this, the better. You will go into this hopefully having a far better experience than those of us who just got clobbered by it coming seemingly out of nowhere. And if you're in an organization, making sure that there is awareness training so that everybody in the organization is aware and can look out for these things in female colleagues. Adapt. I think, you know, I've already alluded to this, but I think the menopause forces or gives you the opportunity to make changes. And the earlier you can look at unhealthy habits and standards. So for example, a lot of the women that I coach have a real thing around perfectionism. And that is problematic at any point. But at a time when you are short on time and energy, it's really important that you start to recognize what is good enough. That's not about you dropping standards to unacceptable levels, but too many women push themselves more than they need to. And so this is an opportunity to go, actually, how can I improve my time management? How can I look at letting go of things so that I'm not micromanaging to a level that is not needed and will actually push me over the edge? Obviously, from a workplace point of view, there are things that can be adapted. Again, the sort of the standard ones are things around temperature, possibly uniforms, possibly working hours. Now, I'm aware that that's not always easy for every organization, that level of flexibility, but there are things that can be done. And one of the ones that I wanted to suggest is based on something that happens in my children's school. We all know, sadly, that there's a mental health crisis going on in our schools. And the good thing is the stigma has been removed from that. And what my children's school does is, for those children who are struggling, they have a timeout card, and they can literally stand up at any point during a lesson and just go out for however long they need and no questions asked. And it occurred to me, looking back on those times when I was falling asleep in meetings because I was so tired and I was pinching my legs under the table, trying to keep myself awake, that if I'd had a timeout card where I could have just stood up and everyone just understood, nobody needed to ask me any questions, there was no shame attached to it, and I could have gone out, got some fresh air, just wakened up my brain cells, had a coffee or whatever, that would have been a really, really useful resource. So that's just a simple thing that I'm suggesting that you might be able to implement in your workplaces. So care, look at HRT or alternatives. I know that HRT is, as I say, it's a contentious thing. So there are alternatives, but I do want to talk about HRT in the next slide. But the other thing I want to talk about is, now, those of you who already have worked with me, clients, current clients, past clients, know that I love an acronym. So I wanted to come up with an acronym that you might be able to remember called NEST. And this is about you looking after yourselves through good nutrition, exercise, good sleep patterns, and time out. Grab yourself some duvet days. I often just give myself a day off on a Sunday, and I will tell the rest of my family. Sometimes my children think it's great. They'll come and join me, and we'll just watch trashy television or something. And I just need the chance to recharge. These are actually all good recommendations for the rest of your lives. But sadly, sometimes, as I say, it takes us to get to menopause. I had experience of burnout twice before in my life. I learned nothing from it. I just was forced to take some time out, went back into really unhealthy practices, working 60 to 80-hour weeks, not getting enough sleep, relying on alcohol as my treat and my time to sort of wind down, not exercising enough. Now, as a postmenopausal woman, I really, really nest, and I recommend that you do the same. And then obviously being kind to yourselves, and as an organization, being kind to women going through this. One of the things that I find most distressing when I'm coaching women one-to-one or in group programs is the viciousness of our inner critic. Too many women say things to themselves that they would never, ever say to somebody else. And that's bad enough during the rest of our lives. But during menopause, more than anything, we need to forgive ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to develop a kind inner voice. So that's something else that I strongly recommend you look at, and that you look at a kind culture within organizations as well. I thought long and hard about whether to talk about HRT, but I felt that I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't at least share with you the research on this. There has been a lot of misinformation about old forms of HRT, which had a link to breast cancer. There was a study done in the early 2000s that led to a whole load of women coming off HRT to their detriment, and that caused all sorts of other problems. But the new body identical HRT carries no greater risk than drinking. So as I say, sometimes women think I'll battle through the menopause, but actually they don't have the energy to be able to exercise. They don't think about nutrition, and drinking is the sort of way of coping. And body identical HRT carries no greater risk to you. The other thing that I think we have been massively let down on is a view that HRT is just about treating menopausal symptoms. It does help with that, but because what is happening to us is a long-term hormone deficiency, it is also helping us to stay fit and healthier for longer into our older age. So, as I say, the great thing is that we're going to live into our 80s, 90s, into our hundreds, some of us, but far too many women do live that long, but they live with ill health. They live with osteoporosis. They live with Alzheimer's. And HRT reduces those risks. So I would strongly recommend those of you who are thinking about HRT, or even if you are postmenopausal, go away and look at the research. I want all of you to make your own choices, but I want those choices to be informed. So there is a lot of it. There's a much, much stronger evidence base now around HRT and what it can do for us, not only for the menopause, but in terms of our long term. And the safest way to take it is to take progesterone as a pill or Mirena coil, and to take estrogen through the skin as a patch or as a gel. And I would strongly recommend that you also consider testosterone. We do need testosterone. It can help with energy levels and also with our libido. We cannot get ordinary testosterone prescribed for women on the NHS at the moment, but you can, if you're informed, go to a GP and ask for the male equivalent, and some GPs will offer that. So the last strategy I wanted to share with you is, it's the name of this presentation, which is around it's time to talk. And the value of talking to others about this. Too often we have hidden away about the menopause, its effect on us. What I've discovered is the more I've talked about this, the more other people have opened up, and the more we've laughed at the silly side of menopause. And that's a really, really powerful thing. Sometimes we become parts of communities we choose to be or we don't want to be. I'm part of a dog walking community. That's great. I always end up talking with dog walkers. I also lost my sister to breast cancer, and I became suddenly part of a community of people who wanted to talk about relatives dying. I am also now part of a menopausal community, and that has been incredibly valuable to me. And so I strongly recommend that where you feel comfortable doing so, you start talking, because there's a community out there that is willing to open up and be supportive. Secondly, I want to talk about asking for help. It's often a real difficulty, again, with the women that I coach, persuading people that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. And the one thing I wanted to stress is that we all get a dopamine hit when we're asked to help. We love to feel useful. So you're doing a great job if you're asking somebody else for help, because you're giving them a positive buzz. So ask other people, you know, either those who've gone through it, but in your workplace, just say, I'm struggling today. I had a really bad night. I'm suffering with insomnia. Please, could you perhaps help me with this task, or, you know, or something else? Organizations that offer access to talking therapies or coaching, it's a great thing to be able to offer, or obviously as an individual, you can access those. The other thing that organizations can offer, or you can join as an individual, is buddy groups, communities. And then the final thing, where you are comfortable doing so, if you feel comfortable about talking about your own experience, be an ally by talking about those of us who have, you know, come through the other side, so that other people can benefit. In terms of the support I can offer, so I will be sharing with you an 8-step workplace guide, but also a list of resources. I wanted to put together a very short list. I mean, obviously the amount of resources now that are available, books and so forth, is extensive, which is brilliant. But I'm aware that you are all very, very busy people. So I've just listed the things that I go to in terms of books, podcasts, people to follow on social media, and so forth, so that you've just got a list of some key people. And then I can also offer training, support and coaching. And I just wanted to explain a little bit about that. So I can work with you to do a staff audit to find out what people want. I think it's really important that menopause policies are built around what's right for your community. And then obviously I can help develop those policies. Because of my background in training, I can develop staff awareness training for everyone, or offer dedicated support for line managers. I could coordinate those buddy or community groups. I can offer one-to-one group coaching. And the other thing I wanted to flag up is that some of you, particularly if you're in smaller organizations, I can help you identify other organizations so that you can share the costs of providing these things. I can train up to 30 people in one go. If you work in an organization where you haven't got that, we can look at other organizations you can work with so that you can share those costs. In terms of individuals, as I say, I do a lot of one-to-one coaching as well as group coaching. And I wanted to talk about my next group course, which is going to focus specifically on menopause mental wealth. So it's about how you can carry on working well if we look at your mental health as part of going through the menopause. And that will look at time management, productivity, particularly confidence, which is such a big issue. And then looking at how we self-sabotage through those inner voice, critic voices. Some women talk about getting a resurgence of imposter syndrome. And so how we can address those so that we build positive mental habits instead. And what do you get when you work with me? So as somebody with a PhD, I am a doctor. Unfortunately, I can't prescribe. I'm not that sort of doctor, but I do come with research skills. I can help you access the evidence base. I've done a lot of training, and my background is in theatre. And so I hope that, and those who are here, I hope can attest that I'm very experienced in creating safe, warm environments in which you can talk openly about the challenges that you're facing. I have a lot of experience now as a coach, and my passion is around supporting working women because of my commitment to gender equality. And I do come from a background of strategy and leadership. I wanted to talk at the moment to celebrate World Menopause Day. By the way, WMD, my husband said, is that weapons of mass destruction? No, it's World Menopause Day. So if you quote that, there's £100 off any coaching that gets booked before the end of this month, where we're celebrating World Menopause Day. And I am so confident, based on what others have said about me, that you will get benefit out of working with me, that I do also offer a money back guarantee, with one caveat, which is that you do the work as well. It's really important, if you engage in coaching or training, that you're putting that effort in as well. And I just wanted to share with you some of the testimonials of what people have said. Some of the people in this room now have said about how they've worked with me, and you can see more on LinkedIn. So that's the end of my presentation. I will just stop sharing now, but those are my contact details. I'll be sending out obviously a recording of this and my contact details. But I think what I hope I've stressed is that we can't afford not to be talking about this, because of the economic implications, because of the moral implications, the emotional implications. So I'm delighted that there has been a great movement now to talk about these things. There are some fantastic people out there doing work. Carolyn Harris is an MP who's been campaigning about this. The Davina McCall documentaries. I mean, if you do nothing else and you still want to find out a little bit more about that, go and have a look at that. There are some brilliant people out there. There's a woman called Karen Arthur on Instagram who talks about menopause whilst black. Another doctor, Dr. Nigat Arif, who talks about how this affects people in the Asian communities. So there's a wealth of resources out there. There are people trying to make the menopause matter, and there are lots of us now looking at how we address it in the workplace. So that's me done. I wondered if there are questions. I know one of the things that we might want to talk about is, what does a menopause-friendly organisation look like? Maybe there are some of you who have already had that experience, or maybe some of you have got ideas about what that might look like. So over to you in terms of any questions or anything else you want me to talk about. Just either put your hand up or just come on to just speak up. I will stop the recording so that people